was up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come, and oh yes it will. One more thing. Say, boy, I don't want you to hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know, hallelujah, a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Let me just say this. Then I go to my brother, yes sir, and I say, brother, help me please. Oh yes sir, but he winds up knocking me. Oh yes sir. Back down on my knees. Oh, there's been times that I thought I couldn't last too long. Hallelujah. But now I think I'm able to carry on. I know it's been a long time coming, but a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Let me just say it one more time. I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming. The change don't come. Oh, yes it will.
Hi everyone, welcome to the first offering of Liberation Music Therapy 11-week teaching. My name is Dorian Wallace, he, him, a composer, piano player, board certified music therapist, and someone who believes that music can open spaces of resistance, introspection, solidarity, and internal and external repair. This workshop series is designed for anybody working at the intersection of care, art, and justice. It includes music therapists and any other creative arts therapists, mental health professionals, coaches, activists, politically engaged artists, also known as artivists, and any other organizers seeking tools to bring liberation into practice. The primary goal of this workshop is to help demystify capitalist realism, and that is the pervasive belief that there is no alternative to capitalism. Through music, collective inquiry, and embodied practice, we will explore how capitalism shapes our creativity, our nervous system, and our sense of alienation, and how we can nurture liberatory ways of healing, imagining, and being together as a human species. So across these 11 sessions, we'll move through various topics like trauma-informed care, empathetic concern, embodied mindfulness, fascism and high control dynamics, caste systems and class systems, and even personal accountability and collective accountability. So each one builds towards the Praxis wheel, which is an evolving framework for ethical, responsive, and community-centered engagement. It's something that I utilize in my personal practice as a music therapist, as well as an activist and community organizer. So today's presentation is divided into 3 parts, and that is going to be engaged practice, balancing knowledge and wisdom, and liberation philosophy. Okay, so before we dive in, I want to introduce a figure who illustrates a tension that is something that we will revisit through this series, and this is Bartolomé de las Casas. So he was a 16th century Dominican friar who exposed the brutality of the Spanish conquest and fought for reforms to protect indigenous peoples. But, and this is key, he arrived as a settler. He held an encomienda, which is an enslaved indigenous person, and he even endorsed, while fighting for the rights of the indigenous, he endorsed replacing them with African slaves, because that would be more humanistic for the indigenous. So he did recant it, he did change, he did evolve, but Las Casas represents, for our purposes, the well-meaning reformer within the colonial project. So he is really an archetype of the well-meaning liberal or the well-intentioned white person. So for our purposes, he is a cautionary tale of how good intentions can perpetuate harm when we fail to practice genuine decolonial accountability. And so, you know, he's a prime example, if you want to study more about him, of somebody who did do good things within the structure, but ultimately was doing things to keep the powerful, the colonizers, in the colonies. And that's something we need to be mindful, because we can follow this lineage very easily. Something that I take into account with my own work, that when we are there, we are representing the system, or we are representing the oppressive class, or caste system, or whichever piece you may represent. We need to be mindful of that. So we're going to get into part 1, and this is engaged practice. So liberation music therapy begins with an integrated understanding of the concepts of materialism and spirituality. So materialism, or the material reality of everything we literally experience, that is our minds, the meanings that are created, the systems that we build, they arise from concrete conditions. Materialism is the understanding that everything we are working with comes from human bodies, human labor, the land, and resources. So that's the majority of this workshop is going to be around material conditions and understanding the material reality and how things function and operate in a real way. One piece that many socialist and liberatory movements, I believe, and many others, as I'm starting to just catch on to, is the lack of a spiritual understanding within social movements. Because when we're working with real people, we're working with a lot of different ways of expressing spirituality. It can be through religious practice, it can be through just the way you organize your life. But the way that we're going to be concerning spirituality is the relational practice of connecting to meaning, purpose, or something larger than ourselves, what sustains compassion and grounding. Every time the fascist or the capitalist or the colonizer use the argument that human beings are instinctively narcissistic and instinctively violent and instinctively ready to tear each other apart, completely disregards the history of the human species anytime a natural disaster takes place or a horrific event takes place, because human beings gather together and community bonds actually grow stronger during those moments. There's a very good, and I'll put this in the show notes for after the fact when this video goes out, but there was a good insight by Peter Kropotkin on his work with mutual aid, studying a continuation of Darwin's concepts of evolution and how we evolve and adapt for survival. And one of the pieces of human survival is mutual cooperation. And this was later expanded in recent work, more recent work by Stephen Jay Gould, who is a biologist, well-known popular scientist, kind of did a lot of what Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye for our generation may think of. But he was probably more aligned with Carl Sagan because he was a working scientist and journalist on science as well as a popularizer. He didn't do a TV show or anything like that, but he did books and writing. And so he wrote about expanding on Kropotkin's work on the concept of mutual aid and the concept of how humans do take care of each other and have a greater meaning. And so for our purposes, today is just looking at the spiritual concepts and what spirituality actually means when we're communicating with other human beings. And we are not going to be talking about any religious faith. We're not going to be talking about anything supernatural. This is all going to be about embodied practice when we're talking about spirituality. So the sentence I put in my notes before I go to the next slide that I think is important to say is, this workshop is centered on understanding material reality and demystifying these social forces. However, it is essential to establish spiritual grounding before entering the field of oppression and suffering. So this is a little bit from the Buddhist school of thought, but this can be applied to many religious practice. I had a very good conversation with a good comrade and colleague whom I work with, Lucius Jokanen, and he's a Christian. I am not a Christian, and we had a very good conversation in his Shadow Talk dialogue series on the concept of suffering, and I shared with him some of the Buddhist concepts of suffering, and we really had just a good discussion on how Christianity tackles the concept of suffering as well as Buddhism, but there are many practices. Secular humanism even addresses this. So when we say suffering, we are saying that suffering is the emotional, physical, and collective pain caused by harm, loss, and injustice. We encounter it daily. We encounter it in our clients. We encounter it in our communities, and we encounter it in ourselves. If you have experienced any form of abusive relationship, whether it be one you were in or one you witnessed, you have experienced suffering in your life. It is that ongoing longing. That's one thing the Buddhists speak about. Christianity does speak about this a lot as well, and I do not want to speak about any religions in any serious way. I just know that when I've spoken to Muslims and spoken to Christians and spoken to Buddhists and spoken to many people about the concepts of suffering, It's really how we relate to the world and how we address that suffering. That is what spirituality is, or that is what a spiritual practice is. So one concept that I really, really appreciate is to be engaged versus being entangled. So to be engaged means staying present with suffering while maintaining clarity, boundaries, and self-care. Whereas to be entangled means losing ourselves in suffering, carrying more than we hold, becoming overwhelmed and absorbing the harm beyond your capacity. It's our task. It's not to avoid suffering. That's an impossible thing to do. But it's to meet suffering skillfully, to be attuned without dissolving. A really good analogy that I have heard, and I believe this was Thich Nhat Hanh, but I may be incorrect. Actually, it might be Larry Ward. But the analogy that I heard that I really appreciate about engaged versus entangled is, if you are entangled, you see a house and the house is on fire. You run into the house. You save as many people as you can. You grab as many people. You help as many people as you can. You have no support. You have no gear with you. You are doing this completely just because you are there, and you know people are in there who are going to be harmed, and so you're going into this house to do that. However, the likelihood of you being harmed by rushing in this way and by experiencing things without a plan or without organization, you will likely perish. And you will not be able to go to another burning house tomorrow and protect and help those people. Now, this is a space of privilege. So, for instance, if you are in the midst of a genocide and you are one of the victim types of a genocide, we're not having a discussion about a person in that type of a circumstance. We're talking about people who can make the choice to step into a place of oppression and suffering, where we're talking about that. So when we have the choice to step into these places, we need to go engage. So with the fire analogy, the house on fire, being entangled, running in, saving as many people as you can, no gear, no support, no plan, no prior training necessarily, heroic, but you might perish, and the likelihood of you perishing is high, and you will not be able to save a house that is on fire tomorrow or the next day. Being engaged is seeing a house on fire, and you know exactly what to do. You have the gear, that you've done many, many training exercises in which you've gone through many different types of houses. You've practiced with other people who have had experience going through burning houses. You have a history and a lineage of different ways that people have worn gear or communicated inside and outside the burning house. You can still perish. There is still a likelihood of perishing if you go into this situation. But the likelihood of being able to survive is much higher. You're also taking care of your own self. Because I will tell you all from personal experience that when we go into these dark places in a more entangled way, or let me put it this way, when we are not going in with an engaged practice, that means that we are more likely to harm ourselves, which means we are more likely to harm our communities. And this is one reason it's important for us as practitioners to really work on being engaged when we go into these spaces of heavy oppression and heavy suffering. And I'm not going to specify on what that means. This could be sexual abuse counseling. This could be a support group. This could be a class you teach. This could be a prison. This can be anywhere where you are, where there is oppression that you are aware of, that you have the privilege of being able to step in and out of that space. Then we as practitioners need to focus on being engaged, not entangled. So some resources y'all can check out on your own. Thich Nhat Hanh has 14 practices of engaged Buddhism, which is just a very good list. If you want, you can replace the word Buddhism with your own practice. It literally works. I once replaced it with secular humanism. The entire thing works as just a way to develop a practice, but I'm not going to be showing that here. The other is Bell Hooks took from Thich Nhat Hanh's concept of engaged Buddhism and applied it in a concept called engaged pedagogy. And she speaks very much about the communal aspects of engaging a classroom and how to engage a classroom in a very healthy and holistic way. It is, if you are not familiar with Bell Hooks' work, she is an extremely important social theorist, especially within the critical pedagogy and education realms. And she specifically wrote from her personal experience, as well as just some of the best scholarship I think that is out there on the experience of Black womanhood within the contemporary United States capitalist system. And she writes about Black feminism and intersectional feminism in some of the best ways that I've personally seen. And she has written a lot about engaged pedagogy. And I believe the books are Engaged Pedagogy is like the first one. And the second one is Transgressions in Teaching, or Teaching for Transgressions, something like that. But if you type in transgression in teaching, it will literally be the only option that shows up. Yeah, so we're going to go on for our purposes to part 2. This is balancing knowledge and wisdom. And so for our purposes, you can do your own individual practice on how you develop your own engaged concepts. And I put forward the Thich Nhat Hanh 14 precepts of engaged Buddhism, as well as the Bell Hooks engaged pedagogy concepts as ways that have personally helped me in sort of understanding my spiritual practice and my communal organizing practice or facilitating practice. But that being said, it really is for you to learn for what makes sense for your own practice, your own spiritual space. So for the purposes of this course, we're going to be talking about how to balance knowledge and wisdom. So what are knowledge and wisdom? The way that we're going to define it here is knowledge is awareness, and it can come from observation, it can come from study, it can come from lived experience, it can come from reliable information. It can involve facts, practiced skills, or direct familiarity with people, places, and lived experiences. Wisdom is the art of skillfully applying, or the capacity to apply, knowledge with discernment and care. It blends experience, perspective, ethics, and emotional intelligence to make choices that reduce harm and nurture well-being, especially when conditions are uncertain or complex. So, knowledge is the cultivating of learning and cultivating either skills or information or experiences, whereas wisdom in this concept, at least within our engaged practice, is how you apply that knowledge with discernment. Now, I'll give just one personal example as a music therapist, and I'll use the prison system as the place. Through knowledge, I have learned that hip-hop music is one of the most influential and most important music art forms used within the prison structure, the carceral structure. So I know that I need to come prepared with lots of hip-hop music, and I have to have a lot of knowledge about hip-hop music, the artist, the genres, the age areas, the lineage, all those factors. But there has to be wisdom applied. There has to be discernment. Because, for instance, if I go into a room and it is all 19-year-olds from the Bronx, and they are all gang involved, they are all poverty involved, and I look at them, and I come in with, let's say, an artist like Tupac as the first artist to start with, that can actually be extremely racist and extremely ageist. And the reason why is I have just shown that I'm looking at an entire group of people as so monolithic that I am going to, as a white male, going to go to the most obvious black hip-hop artist of my generation who is going to be talking about high-level stuff, whereas I am talking to an entirely different generation of black youth who that is not necessarily their music. It may be the music that they hear all the time. There might actually be even some super fans of Tupac in there. But with discernment, you have to understand that by showing up that way, you are actually showing how out of touch you are and how ignorant you are, how racist your behavior is, because you don't see them as individual human beings or as a collage of humanity. You see it as a blanket group, a monolithic group of black people. And that's where wisdom comes in. So I have to come in and know that if I play K-Flock, it's going to get a different response than if I play Tupac. If you don't know the difference between K-Flock and Tupac, now you know what you have to learn. So they're both hip-hop artists. And the folks I work with, K-Flock has a much bigger impact on the actual relationship building. So in this balancing, a way to conceptualize it is there are 3 ways of processing knowledge or taking in knowledge, and there are 3 ways of wisdom or discernment. And so that would be knowledge that, or just like knowing facts, for instance. We know that an A440 frequency is going to sound the pitch of an A no matter what. If I make anything that is a frequency that goes to 440, it's going to buzz an A pitch. These are extremely important things to know, especially in our work. For instance, knowing facts about gun violence is something that I've found extremely important in this liberation work. There's an organization known as the Violence Project, and it is the largest database of mass shooters and the largest psychological study done on the psychology of mass shooters. I believe it starts in 1966. They released the first long form book, which is a super banger if you're into reading about just important information about data and violence and social reform. But the book is also called The Violence Project. And they found, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but they found that every mass shooter has 4 characteristics that they all share. And that is a moment of crisis, a study period, access to weaponry, and opportunity to commit an act. So, meaning that there were no mass shootings in places where people couldn't get to. That is a consideration that you have to consider. There was always opportunity. The majority of mass shooters gained their weapons through legal means. The reason I'm bringing this up is knowing facts, I know that it is more likely if you have armed security at a school that a mass shooter is going to show up or that violence is going to show up. Because in the study of mass shooters, most mass shooters are not sociopaths or narcissists or antisocial personality disorder. They are much more likely to be people who are struggling with extreme despair. So people who are struggling with suicidal and homicidal ideation. One of the reasons many mass shooters kill themselves is because they don't want to deal with the trauma of what they just did. They are committing suicide and going out in a large way. This is important. I don't want to write off knowing facts. It's the centerpiece of our knowledge. We need to know the material realities, the data. We need to know the skills. That gets us to the next one, which is knowledge how. Knowing how to perform a skill. It's embodied learning. So this is like playing an instrument or knowing how to dance or knowing how to ride a bike. Knowing how to do a skill. This is the embodied knowledge. I know people that are listening here have experience with professional dance. Of course, the embodied knowledge is extremely important, but we also have the knowledge that, or the propositional knowledge, the factual knowledge that helps us do things better with the knowledge how. We also have the knowledge how that helps us understand the knowledge that a little better. Sorry if this is getting too confusing with the how and that, but the point is that we have knowledge of information and knowledge of doing actions. The third form of knowledge is the experiential knowledge, and this is knowing something direct firsthand. I can tell you what a piano sounds like, but if I play a piano, you know what a piano sounds like. You know the difference between a guitar and a piano just by hearing it. You do. You as a person. That is our knowledge by acquaintance, our experiential. Another example, just to get it out of music terms, but you know the taste of a strawberry because you have tasted a strawberry. So I'll give one last real example for each knowledge that, knowledge how, knowledge by, and then move to wisdom. Knowledge that. You know that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. Knowledge how. You know how to ride a bike for the rest of your life. Knowledge by acquaintance. You know what a strawberry tastes like because you have tasted a strawberry. Cool. Moving on to wisdom. So wisdom unfolds also in 3 dimensions. This is reflective wisdom, which is insight, that is recognizing our patterns and limits, holding humility and curiosity. It takes a lot to self-acknowledge. It is hard to acknowledge, for instance, that I, as a person who did not grow up with very much money, still experienced a massive amount of privilege based on the fact that I was born male, I present as male, I identify as male, I'm white-skinned, white-bodied, so I walk through this world with certain things that I have to be aware of that I did not earn. They were just given to me. And I have to be aware that that is happening. So this is just to give some ideas on insights. We have to acknowledge when we're angry about things, or when we're upset, or when we're disturbed. I will tell you all from personal experience, I am very choosy when I watch violent videos that pop up on social media. People go, "Did you see?" I go, "Hold on. What is it about?" The person will describe it to me. And I say yes or no. Because I've seen too much violence in my life. And sometimes I need to literally say, no, I don't need to see that. I have enough reflective wisdom to know that that will not do me any good to take in this new piece of information. Now we get to practical wisdom. The Greeks called it phronesis. But this is making skillful decisions in real time, in tangible situations. So like street smarts or reading the room, it's just being able to make an action that fits into context. I'll tell you all, just like as a musician, like this is when you're in the moment and you just put the right thing in. You don't overshare, you don't undershare. You're just being right in the moment. You don't know what the right chord is, but you definitely know what the wrong chord is when you play it, if that makes any sense. It's almost the discernment of moving through life. So we've got practical wisdom, which is the discernment of understanding what's going on internally within ourselves and our own humilities and lack of knowledge. And the practical wisdom, which is making skillful decisions in real time. And this gets us to the final, which is relational wisdom, and that's compassion. And that is attuning to the needs and dignity of others, that the interconnectedness of others, and having an awareness that harm and healing ripple across relationships. I will tell you all, just an example, if you are in a relationship with somebody and you lie to that person for your own somatic processing, and I'm talking about like cheating on a person, it may not feel like it impacts you. But that does have an impact on other people. And so there is a thought process on being mindful on our relationships. And the reason I'm going right to sexual relationships is that is one of the most challenging areas for us as human beings to treat with respect and treat with dignity. And so we're going to talk a lot during this course about sexual abuse, unfortunately, because that is a big piece of what happens in these spaces, and we need to know how to work through them and process through them. But the point is that when you have power, you have to understand and navigate with serious relational wisdom. You have to be aware of what your behavior and engagement can do to harm others. Now, we'll get into it much later. This can be abused the way that I'm speaking right now. This is not about rigid rules. Wisdom is about being reflective. It's about being able to navigate. It's about being able to move through the forest. You don't know the path because the path is completely covered, but you know how to move through the jungle because you've done it a million times. That's what we're talking about with wisdom. We're going to get to the final part of the presentation, liberation philosophy. And I'm not really going to cover too much about it because the whole course is really about liberation philosophy. But this is just a breakdown on what we're actually getting towards. Why are we developing an engaged practice? It is so we can move through the world in a productive and healthy and holistic way for the community, for the people, for the human beings. So liberation philosophy can be broken down into a couple of tenets, pillars, if you will. The first and most important is centering the marginalized. The most impacted by structural violence hold the most crucial insight and leadership for liberation. Now, we're going to talk about this because there is a bourgeois way that we think of leadership. There is a upper class way we think of leadership, even if you're not from the upper class. If you went to college, you were taught a certain way of leadership, or if you went into a business or a trade, you were taught a certain type of leadership. And when we go into another social class or another social caste, leadership can be interpreted in different ways. So it's very important for us to get out of our own ways and out of our own colonizer way of thinking and identifying what leadership actually looks like within the marginalized communities and learn from that leadership. Because these people in these horrific situations know how to navigate these spaces more than anybody else on the planet. So it's extremely important to center the marginalized. Critique of power and hegemony. So liberation philosophy is about identifying and dismantling how domination is normalized through culture, economy, and institutions. We just have it normal for the longest time that American television was just supposed to be white people. We just wrote off entire groups of people. We act like indigenous people are extinct. There are indigenous people that live in New York City who never left New York City. They were here before it was New York City. But this is one of those pieces. We need to dismantle decolonial epistemology or decolonial knowledge. And this is about valuing and restoring suppressed ways of knowing and wisdom. There are issues. I think the cult recovery space is an extremely important space for helping to identify working with an authentic indigenous practitioner or a con artist, because there are con artists. And that is not only a psychological issue, but it is also a systemic issue, that people utilize con artistry as a way to survive and navigate this capitalist system. So we're also talk about that it is collective and individual. So it's rooted in communities and movements struggling for dignity, justice, and freedom. So we are worried about our community, our human species, as well as ourselves and our human body. And finally, there's praxis, which is reflection plus action. So that is knowledge must move towards material change. We study oppression in order to interrupt it. And so that really gets us to the lineage of liberation philosophy, or the historical development. So we would not have liberation philosophy if it were not for the original anti-colonial and revolutionary movements that are challenging, either in the past or currently challenging, cultural hegemony. There is liberation theology, which is a practice that developed in South America, Brazil. We'll learn more about it, but it is grounded in the preferential option for the poor. It is grounded, it is a concept, it is a philosophical movement that is grounded. The basis is putting the options of the poor first. Poverty first. The needs of poverty are put first. Decolonial thought, and this is seeking to disentangle people from or to de-link from the colonial power structures. For instance, I joke, but I'm not joking at all. The largest cult in the world is patriarchy. It's a 10,000-year-old cult, or a 10,000-year-old high dynamic group that has slowly, systematically divided human species into two categories of groups. And there are people who fight for these rigid categories to stay in place. It's just something that we need to critique and understand so we can de-link from these ways of thinking. And then critical pedagogy. This is about really centering about conscientization, or the waking up of consciousness for people. And really the center of this entire workshop is liberation psychology, which is the pursuit of de-ideologizing the psyche of domination. So as music therapists and activists, our task is to continue the work and the roots that our human ancestors have laid down in music making, in practice, and the relationships we build. So for next week, we'll explore the Praxis wheel, which is, I'll put it in the show notes, but it's an 8 spokes of ethical and transformative engagement, from a trauma-informed care to understanding justice. You're more than welcome to attend as many or as few of these as you can. Each stands alone, but it does form a much larger arc. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking your mental health seriously. Thank you for bringing your practice and your presence. Thank you for helping to imagine a world beyond capitalist realism. Let's continue to make music that heals, remembers, and resists. I'll leave this up on the screen and I'll also put these in the show notes. I am putting the ability for donations, either Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App. This is not a requirement, and this workshop is open to anybody who wants to attend. There is not a cost. If you cannot give 2 cents, do not give 2 cents. Keep that 2 cents. This is free for everybody, but the donations help me make this work more possible. And finally, please stay connected. You can check out my website, dorianwallace.com, projects for performances and resources. And then my Substack, doriansmode.substack.com, where I put essays, information about workshops, liberation music, and music therapy reflections.
May be weary. Them young girls, they do get wearied wearing that same old miniskirt dress. Yeah. But when she gets weary, you try your little tenderness. Yeah. Oh man, now I know she's waiting, just anticipating for things that she'll never possess. No. But while she's there waiting, try just a little bit of tenderness. That's all you got to do. Now it might be a little bit sentimental, no. But she has her grief and care, yeah. But the soft words, they are spoke so gentle, yeah. And it makes it easy to bear. Oh, really, no. Young girls, they don't forget it. Love you, happiness. Yeah. But it's all so easy. All you got to do is try. Yeah, man. All you got to do is know how to love her. You got to hold her, squeeze her, never leave her. You got to hold her, squeeze her, never leave her. Got to just pop it. Pop it, bit of pop it. Oh, but you got to hold her, squeeze her, never leave her. Pop it, bit of you need, baby, you got all I'm asking. Want a little respect when I come home. Hold on. Do me wrong, honey, if you want it. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Now that's what it means to me. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Take care of T-C-P. Respect.